Zionism is built on a biblical myth, turning ancient stories into a political playbook.
Okay, go ahead.
Imagine using a superhero comic to justify real-world actions. That's essentially what Zionism does with the story of the conquest of Canaan by a chosen people. This myth, a people returning to their ancestral land, was used to legitimize Zionist institutions in Palestine. Today, Israeli media and schools continue to push this narrative, but let's be clear, the biblical land of Israel and people of Israel are literary constructs, not political facts.
No, Zionism is an acknowledgement that Jews have a right for independence in their homeland exactly like any other nation has a right to independence in their homeland. It has nothing to do with the conquest of Canaan, nothing to do with the chosen people, nothing to do with biblical narratives, and nothing to do with your comic book superheroes. The plain historic fact is that Jews lived in their homeland, the land of Israel, non-stop for over 3,000 years. The Manepta Stele, dated to the 13th century BCE, mentions the people of Israel in the region of Canaan more than 3,000 years ago. The Kirk monolith from the 9th century mentions Achav, king of Israel, exactly like the Teldad Stele mentions the king of Israel, and the Mesha Stele mentions the kingdom of Israel. These are pure historic and archaeological facts, nothing to do with any of your narratives. You have the records of Sennacherib mentioning his siege on the kingdom of Judah. You've got the Lachish letters mentioning the siege of the Babylonians against the kingdom of Judah. That is when the idea of Zionism first emerged. In the Babylonian captivity, when the Babylonians took people from Judah back to Babylon, they wanted to return to their homeland, the land of Israel, or Zion, which is a different name for Jerusalem. And you know what? It worked because Cyrus the Great, the king of Persia, allowed the Jews to return to their homeland, to Judea. Again, the Edict of Cyrus, or the Cyrus Cylinder, is a proven historical archaeological fact. It's not a biblical narrative. The Judean autonomy under the Persians, Yehud Medinata or Yehud, is a proven archaeological fact. These are the coins that they used. The Hebrew letters Yud He Daled stand for Yehud. Later on, Judea was occupied again by the Greeks, which led to the Maccabean revolt and the establishment of the Hasmonean kingdom of Judea. Again, that's a proven historic archaeological fact. It has nothing to do with any conquest of Canaan. It has nothing to do with any chosen people. It has nothing to do with any divine promise. It's an historical fact that the Jews in Judea regained independence during the Hasmonean period. Here are the coins that they used. Again, written in Hebrew, talking about the high priest, about the consul of the Jews. Later on, Judea was occupied again by the Romans, and the Jews revolted again. Why? Because they wanted independence in their homeland. The coins of the first revolt mentioned for the freedom of Zion. Again, mentioning Zionism, the concept that Jews want to be independent in their homeland. When the Romans crushed that rebellion, they minted these coins of Judea Capta, meaning Judea is under captivity. They didn't even call it Palestine back then. They're mentioning that Judea is being captured by the Romans. But Jews, being Jews, wanted to gain independence in their homeland. That's why they revolted again. The Bar Kokhba revolt was another attempt of Jews to regain independence in their homeland. It's a proven historical, archaeological fact. These coins from the Bar Kokhba revolt mention for the freedom of Israel, Legeulat Israel. But here's a fact that's going to shock you, because even after the Bar Kokhba revolt was crushed, even after the Romans introduced the name Syria Palestina to replace the name Provincia Judea, still Jews remained the majority in the land of Israel up until the 4th century. Just go and visit cities like Tzipori or Bet She'arim to see the amazing Jewish artifacts from that time period. And again, in the 4th century, Jews were still fighting for independence in their homeland. The Galos Revolt in the 4th century was another attempt of Jews to regain independence. And even after that, there was a significant and meaningful Jewish presence in their homeland. You can see literally several synagogues from the 5th, from the 6th, from the 7th century. For example, in Bet Alpha, in En Gedi, in En Kshatot. This is not a biblical myth. In the 7th century, there was another revolt against the Byzantines. It's called the Heraclius Revolt, when the Jews cooperated with the Persians and regained control over Jerusalem for a few years. Jews always seek to regain independence in their homeland. Now, you might argue that in the 7th century, when Islam took over, all of the Jews in Israel converted to Islam. But that, again, is false, because in the 10th century, the Islamic historian Al-Maqdisi that lived in Jerusalem wrote about Jerusalem. Everywhere the Christians and the Jews have the upper hand, and the mosque is void of congregation, meaning that there was a meaningful Jewish presence in Jerusalem even in the 10th century. That's 3 centuries after the Islamic occupation of the land of Israel, because Jews maintained continuous presence in their homeland. Around that time period, between the 10th and the 11th century, he developed the vocalization system known as the Tiberian Nikud. It was developed in Tiberias, in Tveria, in the land of Israel, by Jews living there. But more importantly, throughout all of the ages, Jews tried to regain independence in their homeland. They tried to live back in Israel, even Jews that lived in the diaspora. For example, in the 16th century, you had that lady, Dona Gracia Nassi. She was born in the diaspora in Portugal, but her ambition was for the Jews to live in their homeland, in Israel. That's why she leased the city of Tveria from the Ottoman ruler. In the early 18th century, Napoleon himself issued a letter saying that if he managed to conquer the land of Israel, he will give the Jews autonomy in their homeland. Long before the First Zionist Congress, there were more Jews than any other religion in Jerusalem. Arguing that Zionism or the modern state of Israel is based on a biblical narrative, it's like arguing that the modern state of Greece is based on the Greek mythology, or that the modern state of England is based on the legends of King Arthur. Greeks maybe did not inherit Greece from Zeus or from the pantheon of Greek gods, but still they have a historic connection to Greece, exactly like the English have a historic connection to England and the Jews have a historic connection to Judea. It doesn't matter what narratives they developed to explain why they're there. The fact is that the Greeks and the Jews lived in their homelands for over 3,000 years, and that's the important thing. Even if you remove your biblical narratives, you remove what the Quran says about the people of Israel in the land of Israel, you remove your comic book fantasies, in the end of the day, the remaining historical archaeological fact is that Israel is the homeland of the Jewish people. It's where the kingdoms of Israel and Judah existed. It's where Jews continued living non-stop in their homeland, waiting to regain independence until we finally made it.